But Richard, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce Tim the Yowie Man.
Here I come, Constantinople, here I come, Constantinople, I am coming, Constantinople, here I come. Here I come, Constantinople, here I come, Constantinople, I am coming, Constantinople, here I come. All the leaves are off of the oak and all the sheep have followed the spoken word. I'm coming, Constantinople, here I come. Here I stand out in the open. All my friends are with you and hoping that I make it, Constantinople, here I come. Here I come, Constantinople, here I come, Constantinople, I am coming, Constantinople, here I come. Here I come, Constantinople, here I come, Constantinople, I am coming, Constantinople, here I come. He single-handedly defeated the capitalist giant known as Cadbury's. He sabotaged and destroyed the mental and spiritual blight that we call I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. And anybody who punishes, spoils or wrecks reality television is in my book a hero. He has come all the way from possibly the greatest country on earth. It's a bit of a two-horse race between Australia and Japan, I'm undecided. But a bloody good country, a country that has marsupial wolves, 30-foot crocodiles, the world's most venomous snakes.
Kind of a no.
Yeah, there's a fly in all the ointments, isn't there? The cassowary, the world's most dangerous bird that can slash your stomach open. That's a country that means business. We've got hedgehogs and squirrels and all puffy little things like that. They've got some real wildlife that means business. All the way from Australia, the one, the only legend that is Tim the Yowie Man! Give it up!
Thank you very much, Richard, and good evening, everyone. I'm not actually sure whether it is evening because, believe it or not, I left home on Monday night and I arrived here at 5 to 7 tonight, and the whole time travelling. So I haven't actually slept since Monday night, so if I fall over or something happens tonight, please forgive me because it's been a bit of a difficult trip to get here for various reasons, but got here at 5 to 7 just in time. I'd like to thank John and Richard and the CFZ family for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to come and talk to you all. And yeah, again, if I fall over, please just come pick me up off the floor. Some of you might have seen the program which doesn't exist. Is that right, John? Or does exist? The program which might exist? No?
Timothy, I love you dearly, but what the hell are you talking about?
Some of you might have seen in the program that I was now to talk about.
Oh God, that program!
Yes.
I haven't slept much more than you in the last few days, a little bit there.
About Yowie is the Australian Bigfoot, but I thought the talk's at 10:30 at night. It's been a long day for everyone. I thought I'd broaden it a little bit. So tonight it's going to be Australia, the weird country, which includes, of course, the Australian Bigfoot or the Yowie, after which I'm named. Not because I look like it, but because I go looking for it and I have my own encounter, which you'll hear about later. Okay, there's Australia. Thank you very much for this world's second best country. Of course, I love being here in England because I actually like prowling around England just as much as I do around Australia. So thank you very much for having me here in England. However, Australia, as you can see up there on the map, for those of you not familiar with it, is a huge country. And over the last 15 years, I've managed to spend most of my life travelling to just about everywhere around Australia. In fact, I've kept a little record of where I've been, and I've been to almost every place in Australia that's over 500 people. So it's been a pretty long trip around the country in 15 years. And tonight I'm going to share with you some of the unusual aspects of Australia that I've managed to track down in that last 15 years or so. Ooh. Now, 15 years ago I became Tim the Yowie Man because I had my own chance encounter with the Australian Yowie, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But after having this encounter with the Yowie, big, black, hairy, ape-like creature romping through the bush, I thought I needed to set up an organisation. I didn't have the manpower of John and Richard or their knowledge or their skill of their team, so I decided to set up by myself the very extravagantly named Australian Centre for Mystery Investigations, which you can see up here. It investigates various aspects of unusual phenomena. Now, it wasn't long after I set up the Australian Centre for Mystery Investigations, someone pointed out the acronym is actually pronounced ACME. And I had all these calls for the roadrunner looking for explosive gear, but that's another story. So unusual phenomena, I've been stalking around Australia looking for the paranormal. By paranormal, I mean things such as UFOs. This slide here shows a UFO landing pad in outback Northern Territory. Has anyone here been to the Northern Territory? No one? No, anyway, it's a big part of Australia in the north, and it's the UFO capital of Australia. UFOs are reported there on a very regular basis, and in fact in the year 2002, over a 6-week period, during the 6-week period, there were UFO sightings every night over that 6-week period at a place called Wycliffe Well, which is where this very unusual UFO landing pad has been set up. Now, one of the theories behind why there's been so many UFOs sighted in this part of Australia is that Australia and the US have a joint military base, secret military base called Pine Gap, which is just south of Wycliffe Well, and it's thought that perhaps a lot of the UFOs that are sighted in the area come from the military base. Okay, another example of the paranormals. Anyone here had an anti-alien abduction helmet? No, I'm not joking. Has anyone here got one or brought one with them? No? Have you heard of the anti-alien abduction helmet? Yeah. So some of you might have. Michael Mencken in the United States, he manufactures them. And after establishing ACME back in 1995, I thought I needed to get all these reports from people. So people would send me reports of bunyips, yowies, other mysteries in Australia, but by far the biggest number of reports I used to get were of UFOs. Now, unfortunately, I'm not much of a UFO buff. I know some of you might be, but I'm not much of a UFO buff, so I didn't want to investigate many of these cases. However, the surprising thing was that of all these UFO reports, around half or 50% of these people that claim they saw UFOs claim that they didn't only see an unidentified flying object, but on top of that, they saw some sort of alien activity in or around the UFO. And of that 50%, 90% of them said in the reports that I was getting to my website that they were subjected to some sort of probe. Has anyone here been probed? And of that 90% that claim they've been probed, 90% of them claim they've been probed, you know where. And of them, almost all of them wanted to show me where they'd been probed. So I quickly closed down that part of the website. But before I did, Michael Mencken from the US, who makes these helmets, this is me testing one on top of a building in Hobart down in the south of Australia. He invented one of these helmets, and well, he invented many of them. This was prototype number 3, I think, and he sent it over to Australia to me and said, "Tim, you can manufacture them or be my outlet in Australia to distribute them around the country." And I wasn't into that because, as I said, I'm not a UFO buff. But I said, I'll test it out though, because I know all the sites around Australia where people claim they've been abducted by aliens, because they've been reporting it to me. So send one over and I'll give it a test. But send me a ticket all around Australia so I get to go to all the alien hotspots. So he sent me a ticket, and for those of you familiar with Australia, we might hear the names. I managed to go to Brisbane, Townsville, Cairns, Darwin, Broome, Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Launceston, Hobart, Canberra and Sydney on this trip for about 3 weeks around Australia. The whole time, had to wear that helmet. This was before September 11, and I was able to actually wear it through the airport things without them being too fussed. I just looked under it and I said, I can't take it off, because apparently when you take it off, that's when you're abducted. During that 3 weeks, guess how many times I was abducted by an alien? None. It works. So Michael Mencken said, as proven to work, and proven to work by Tim the Yowie Man in Australia, the anti-alien abduction helmet is 100% successful. So I haven't got one tonight, but that's an example there of the paranormal. In Australia we have many ghosts. Has anyone seen the ghost on the left? See the ghost up on the top left there? In fact, I've just finished writing a book which I think Richard has as reviewed for Animals and Men a few editions ago, called Haunted and Mysterious Australia, where I've investigated over 90 haunted locations in and around Australia. You might think, England, you know, we've got all these haunted castles, what have you got in Australia? You know, people have only been there for 200 years, but of course, that's only Europeans, and a lot of Australia's hauntings are out there in water holes and out there in the middle of the desert, and they're not necessarily haunted buildings, but they're haunted locations. Where's Charles gone? We had Charles Ford in here earlier. Has he already done the bolt?
I think you have nicked off back to Albany.
He's gone. Alright, so under ACME, under unusual phenomena, I looked at the paranormal, or still do, and Fortean studies, as I like to call it. He was talking about falls. I didn't even realise he was doing this, but he was talking about strange things falling from the sky. In Australia, we have quite a large number of fish falls. For those of you familiar with the Weird Weekend and been here before, you might remember Tony Healy. Has anyone here seen Tony Healy before? Australian cryptozoologist, yeah? You can see him up there on the top left with his hat. In Australia, we wait for fish to fall from the sky because, as you can see from that photo, it never rains. It's just dust out there. But Tony Healy has investigated over 220 cases in outback Australia of fish falling from the sky. And you can see a couple of fish there on the other slide, spangled grunters that were found in an outback station in the middle of nowhere. There was no storm had passed over, and all these fish literally started coming from the sky. And that was one example, and that's just one that occurred. That was in 2002. But Tony, Paul and myself, Paul Cropper is a colleague of Tony Healy, investigate these fish falls around Australia. It's by far and away the biggest or the most common fall. We don't get frogs falling from the sky very often or anything else like that. It's mainly fish. Look at that. Does anyone recognise where that particular crop circle was taken? Or where that photo was taken? Yep. Crop. Yep, it's in a crop, but this is known as one of the more modern crop circles. One of the modern crop circles of recent times, of the modern era, and it was actually a crop circle that appeared in a crop in Queensland in January 1966, long before a lot of the crop circle hype occurred here in the United Kingdom and elsewhere in the world. And it was basically a cane farm. Farmer woke up in the morning, went down to his crop, and he saw the UFO, or he saw what he claims to be a UFO taking off from this crop. And the reeds there that you can see were all matted together with heat, and they were circulating still in a clockwise fashion. After that date, in January 1966, there were reports of over 100 similar circles found in crops around that part of Queensland. And in fact, Doug and Dave, the famous crop circle makers here from the UK, claim that this actually was one of the reasons that made them go and make crop circles here in Australia, here in the UK, that they were inspired by this event in Australia, which still I'm not sure how they were made or by what or who. Fast forward to September 11, 1973, and this happened in the state of Queensland. In a cane crop, all these unusual patterns appeared overnight, but a lot of people say, oh, it was just a strange storm that came through, a wind throw. But there was no wind that night, and the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia recorded no wind. No one in the area recorded wind, and this remains one of the biggest mysteries in Australia in terms of damaged crop. As you can see, they're not in intricate patterns like you have here in the United Kingdom, but an unusual appearance appeared in these crops overnight. Okay, so we've got under unusual phenomena, we've got paranormal Fortean studies and also cryptozoology. Who here's a cryptozoologist or wants to be or used to be or doesn't want to be? Here's a couple of colourful photos because I knew it was going to be 11 o'clock at night. Cryptozoology, count how many times you see this hat tonight, by the way. Yeah. Cryptozoology is, for me anyway, a lot of fun. It's about collecting evidence. There I was collecting some supposed Tasmanian tiger poo. Cryptozoology is about being observant. That's a set-up photo, so I can't tell you what that was. Getting down and dirty. This is an apparent cattle mutilation in the Northern Territory. We don't get many of those in Australia. This one occurred in 1999, and all the internal organs were sucked out of the cow by some unknown force. By the time I got all the way up to the Northern Territory where this was, the cow was pretty much decayed in that state, and all it did was smell, so I didn't get much of a look at that one. But that's the only case of a cattle mutilation I've come across in Australia. Cryptozoology is about being patient. Here's a Yowie crossing that the local council in the northern New South Wales town of Kyogle has put on the road because it's a common spot for Yowie sightings. And in fact, the council up there has a reward for about $10,000 for anyone that captures a live Yowie in the area. I lay on the road till a truck went past. Cryptozoology is about being dangerous. I put this slide in and I thought, oh, I'm talking about Australia, but I left it in there by accident. Here I am actually being arrested by 2 cops in Kansas City in the United States after I was looking for a strange creature in a sewer canal that you can see behind me. Yeah, it wasn't very, very nice that day. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I think I'm a human. I wasn't non-human. Yeah, and for me, cryptozoology is about being fun. It's enabled me to travel around the world and investigate and visit amazing places and investigate many mysteries not only around Australia but around the world. So that's why I love cryptozoology, and that's why I love coming to places like this, because I'm sharing it with like-minded people. You got a question, do you?
Is it free going places?
Is it free? I wish it was free. I'll pass the hat around later. And here's the hat. These hats in Australia are called akubras. They're made of rabbit skin, rabbit fur. And Akubra in Australia have done a study. They've asked me to write down how many miles my hat's gone, and it's apparently, I haven't got the figures with me at the moment, but it's travelled more. There's more it's the most travelled, according to documentation, Akubra in the world. So that's why it's looking a bit tattered. And it became tattered after I was fishing for an unusual creature up in the Yukon in northern Canada, and I always wear the hat, and it was minus 45 degrees, and I think the weather got to the hat. That's why it looks good there, but not anymore. So there's cryptozoology. Okay. I used to be an economist before I became a cryptozoologist. Economists love graphs and putting things into boxes and things like that. And I like doing that too. So the cryptozoologist curve I've got up here, I like to... just got a laser beam. Yep. There we go. Some of you may have seen a graph similar to this before. On this axis here, I have quality of evidence from 0 to 100, where 100 means that means a creature exists. We can go out there and find a badger or something roaming around. This axis here, I've got, sorry, that's the quality of evidence. I told you I was feeling a bit of the jet lag. Up here is the probability of the creature's existence from 0 to 100. Of course, if it's 100, there's a good chance it's out there. 0, very little. So this area here is the area I like to investigate, the cryptozoological zone. Up here is the zoological zone, creatures we know exist. Down here, the myth and legend. So I'm just going to give you some examples from Australia of some creatures that are in the cryptozoological zone. Also some creatures that have moved up and down this graph. Moving from out of the myth and legend, some that have maybe moved down from the zoological into the cryptozoological. First up, the Yowie. Not many photos of Yowies in Australia, but that's an accurate description or an accurate artist's impression of what a Yowie might look like. Now, I became Tim the Yowie Man and became interested in unusual phenomena after I encountered a Yowie in the snowy mountains of Australia in 1994. I was up there doing some university work at the time, valuing the national park for my economics thesis. And it was late May, it was a late May afternoon, it was May 1 in fact, 1994, about 5 o'clock. And I was walking along this ridge, we call them spurs in Australia, and up there in the distance, about 100 yards away, I sighted this big, black, hairy, ape-like creature that had really, really long arms, but not much of a neck. I'm a bit of a cricket fan, you might know Gladstone Small. Yeah? So it had not much of a neck like Gladstone Small, but really long arms, and it was walking like that. It didn't see me, but I certainly saw it, and my immediate reaction was to turn and run. But I thought, if I turn and run, this creature, whatever it is, might chase me. So I literally kept my eye on the creature and walked back step by step, keeping my eye on the creature the whole time for what seemed like minutes, but on reflection was probably only 5 or 10 seconds until I got to a fire trail behind me. Then I took off like a rocket. And prior to that, I'd never even had that much interest in unusual happenings and didn't even know Australia had this Yowie type creature. I've heard of the Bigfoot in the United States and the Yeti in Nepal and other such creatures, but never had heard of that Australia has this Bigfoot type creature. So I spent a lot of the following year basically trying to get to the bottom of the Yowie mystery in Australia, which unfortunately I didn't manage to get any more evidence or capture any video footage or photographs of a Yowie, but in that time I spoke to over 100 people who claimed that they'd had similar sightings to mine. And one of those was a few years later when, I'm not sure if this video will work, but I'm going to play it now. This video footage was taken in the same area where I had my Yowie encounter, but this was taken about 6 years later. I'm not sure if it will work up on this screen, but it's moving from left to right. Something happening? Can you make something out there? I'm not sure if we can see that in this slide. Good point. Where is he? This hasn't worked very well in terms of getting it up on the big screen, but yeah. On the original copy, it's a lot clearer than that. But a businessman called Steve Piper took that film. We've had some investigators from the United States come over and investigate it. The jury's out whether this is conclusive evidence of a Yowie or not. I initially thought it was, and I was quite excited by it, and went to the site and did a lot of experiments to work out how tall it would have been, its gait, where it moved from, where it was maybe moving to, but there's been no other sightings in the area, and to this day we're not sure whether it could be a fake, a hoax, or if it is the genuine footage of a Yowie in Australia. Yeah. Here we go. Can you see it?
Yeah.
It's pretty fuzzy on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, the jury's out on that one.
It certainly looks like.
It could be, but it also could be this sort of thing. But on the original footage, you could look very closely at it. Everyone that looked at it said that it didn't look like a gorilla suit or a human manufactured hoax. But at the same time, we haven't been able to prove that it is definitely a Yowie. There he is there, for those of you who missed it. I should have showed you that earlier. Okay, another creature is the bunyip. Have you heard of the bunyip? Yeah, if you ask 100 Australians what a bunyip looks like, you'll get 100 completely different answers. Here's two examples of what people used to think a bunyip looked like. Bunyips are basically unusual creatures that have been spotted or reported in Australia's inland or swamp waterways. Not sea monsters around the coast, but on the inland. Now, what exactly is a bunyip? Well, if you look on the right, a lot of the early reports, when I say early, in the early 1800s, I mean, after European settlement of Australia, a lot of the reports can be put down to confusion with the platypus, a creature which we do know exists. However, in 1799, when the first platypus was sent from Australia back here to England in a jar, people here in England thought it was a hoax. It was a fake. It took a lot of convincing and a lot more evidence to show that the platypus, which we know is a real creature, and there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them out there in Australia, people here in England thought it was a hoax. At roughly the same time, if not a little bit later, on the left, exhibited in the Colonial Museum in Sydney in Australia, up until 1900, was that skull, and it was called a bunyip skull. People during the 1800s thought bunyips were real, but in the early part of the century didn't even think platypus were real. How about that? That skull, unfortunately for bunyip lovers, ended up being a mutated camel's head, and unfortunately not a bunyip. Now here's two unusual drawings. In these early days, what I've called here the early years of Australian cryptozoology, there were lots of, all these unusual creatures which Richard was talking about in Australia that don't exist anywhere else around the world. People came to Australia and thought, oh, what are all these odd creatures? And many of them were cases of mistaken identity, such as the one at the top from the late 1800s, I think 1890 odd, off an island in Queensland known as Fraser Island. It's the world's biggest sand island. A school teacher called Miss Lavelle spotted this unusual creature and had it documented. She sent the drawings back here to the UK, where I think they appeared actually in the England Journal of Land and Water, I think it was called back then. It was actually published in a scientific journal as Chelisauria lavelli, named after the school teacher that spotted it. But on later inspection, and given there haven't been any other reports of this creature since then, it's thought that this was actually a dugong that lived in the area. And the one on the bottom, I love this one. This is a French naturalist came out to Australia in around 1870 and went out to an outback station and stayed on a farm, and he was served up for dinner a creature which looked like this. It had a spatula-like head, a razor-like tail, and this unusual part in the middle of it. And it was all together on his plate, but it looked a bit mismatched. And the people on the farm, the outback property, were saying, "Oh, you know, there's this creature we found from the local river. You can eat it." And this guy was amazed. He'd never seen anything like it. And he documented it, and he called it Ompax spatuloides, I think spatuloides, as the scientific name for this amazing new creature spotted in Australia and found in Australia that he ate. It was later discovered that the farmer confessed about 5 years later that he'd actually got the head of a platypus, the body of a mullet, and the tail of an eel, and strung them together and convinced this visiting naturalist that it was a new species. So I guess Australians are always prone to hoaxing, so that's why you've got to be careful. Okay, what about some sliders, some creatures? I've been talking about creatures that are in this cryptozoological zone. What about some creatures that were once in the zoological zone? 100% probability they exist and 100% quality of evidence. What about creatures that have fallen down in there? Does anyone know an example in Australia? It's the logo of the thylacine, or the Tasmanian tiger. Now, a lot of people don't realise that the Tasmanian tiger used to live all over Australia, including on mainland Australia, not just Tasmania. And I know there's quite a few Tasmanian tiger fans here and buffs, so I won't dwell too much on the history of the Tassie tiger, but to say that around, and it's estimated maybe around 5,000 years or so ago, the dingo outcompeted the Tasmanian tiger on mainland Australia. And that's one of the reasons that perhaps the Tasmanian tiger no longer existed on the mainland. But the dingo couldn't swim across Bass Strait, a little bit of water separating mainland Australia to Tasmania, and the Tasmanian tiger lived on down in Tasmania until well, maybe it's still there, but until at least the 1930s, when the last Tasmanian tiger that we know of, or that's been known to science, died in a Hobart Zoo, and its name was Benjamin, and sadly, after it died, they discovered Benjamin was actually a girl. And that was an indication of how little we knew about the species, even though it's thought that humans actually drove it to extinction. And the reason it's thought that humans drove it to extinction, before I get to that, I should just point out that slide is actually an Aboriginal cave painting from up at Kakadu National Park on the mainland Australia, indicating that yes, they were definitely around there. But the reason that Tasmanian tigers were killed in Tasmania in the early 1900s were that European farmers went over to Tasmania and they had lots of sheep, and lots of the sheep were being killed, and they thought the Tasmanian tiger was going around there gobbling up all the sheep, because the Tasmanian tiger can open its jaw over 120 degrees, which is quite a long way, and it was just going around massacring all the sheep. And it was demonised as a sheep killer, so the government put on a bounty. It was equivalent of like £1 for every Tasmanian tiger that was killed. And the last Tasmanian tiger that we know of, as I said, died in Hobart Zoo in 1936. Here's one of the poor Tasmanian tigers shot as part of the bounty scheme. And for those of you that haven't seen footage of a Tasmanian tiger before, here's a little bit to whet your appetite. Towards the end here, I think the Tasmanian tiger that you'll see towards the end of this footage will have a little yawn, and you can just see just yawning how far the Tasmanian tiger can open its jaws. This is pretty rare footage. They that much more footage than you can see here at the moment available of the Tasmanian tiger, unfortunately. There he goes. It's a little more. Is it still out there? Put up your hand if you think the Tassie tiger is still out there roaming the... Look at this is fantastic. Do you think it's roaming mainland Australia, or do you think it's roaming Tasmania?
Both.
Both?
Probably both. And New Guinea.
And New Guinea, perhaps New Guinea, yeah. Most of the sightings that I receive, and most of the sightings that other mystery investigators in Australia receive these days, is actually from the mainland, mainly from Victoria, where it was thought they were reintroduced as part of a reacclimatisation project in the early 1900s, and that's thought a lot of the thylacines sightings, alleged sightings around Victoria, come from that. Okay, here's an activity. Count how many times. This is a piece of video just taken around Tasmania, because Tasmania's gone Tassie tiger mad. Not only has the CFZ gone Tassie tiger mad, but Tasmania now, the Tasmanian tiger is on just about anything you can find in Tasmania, including the beer, the pubs. This Tasmanian tiger is playing snooker. It's on the logo of the Tasmanian government. It's in shops. You can buy souvenirs of Tasmanian tigers till the cows come home. It's on the state emblem. You counting? And it's even on the car number plates. Everywhere in Tasmania you go, there's a Tasmanian tiger to be seen. It seems, except a real one out there roaming the bush. However, there's an Australian businessman called Dick Smith who's got a $1 million reward for anyone that can get any conclusive evidence of the Tasmanian tiger. And I think the question up the back was, how do I get paid to go around looking for all these things? I try and get $1 million rewards. But I go looking for the Tasmanian tiger quite regularly. On a one hunt around 7 years ago now, I was down in the northern part of Tasmania called Smithton. There've been recent sightings down there. I had a camera on the front of the bull bar of the car, and I was driving around at night on remote roads, hoping that the Tasmanian tiger, which was nocturnal, or is nocturnal, would come across my headlights, and there I'd see it and I'd be able to snap the photograph of the Tasmanian tiger. It was about midnight on this particular night in Tasmania 7 years ago, and I get a bit edgy when I say this because it's one of the most incredible moments of my life. There, up in the headlights from about here to the back of the room, was this creature. It had stripes on it. It was moving with it seemed to have a bit of a limp on its hind leg. Wow, it's a Tasmanian tiger. I looked at it twice. I slowed down there in my headlights. There it was. It limped very slowly across the road. I thought maybe it's old. Maybe it's one of the last ones. Maybe it's injured. I drove a little bit closer to it before I pulled up to make sure, yep, something's going on here. My heart's beating. I can't believe it. I'm going to not only find the Tasmanian tiger, but Dick Smith's going to give me $1 million. It's going to be great. Finally, Tim the Yowie man is going to go find something. Got a little bit closer and ran out of the car. Got my torch and got to probably from here to the door here, away from the Tassie tiger. Shone my light on it. Heart's still beating. I can't believe it, but it stopped for some reason. The creature stopped, and I thought, why has it stopped? Is it really injured? And I got up closer to it, shone my torch more on the creature, and the most exciting moment of my life became the most disappointing. There, in my torchlight, unfortunately wasn't a Tasmanian tiger, but a greyhound with stripes painted on it. I told an old codger, I call him, in the pub up at Smithton, along with others, that I was out looking for the Tassie tiger. In fact, he told me where to go look, on which roads. And he thought, I'll get this Yowie man, I'll hoax him, and yeah, I got hoaxed, and that's just life, I guess. There it is. Unfortunately, I didn't get a photograph of it. I did have photographs of it, but I'm so disgusted with the event that I don't like to show them anymore. Now, we had, again, my mind's going to be funny because of the travel. Who was the speaker before me? Is he here? Jonathan, talking about big cats in the United Kingdom, particularly around Dorset. In Australia, there are big cats supposedly roaming the bush just about everywhere. I know he's got hundreds or thousands of reports of big cats around the United Kingdom. In Australia, it's by far the biggest cryptozoological phenomena. There's more reports of alien big cats or unusual big cats roaming the Australian bush than any other cryptid in Australia. And because he's given a comprehensive talk on big cats, I won't dwell on big cats in Australia tonight, but I'll just say that, yeah, there are a lot of big cat reports in Australia. Okay, what about a climber? Again, because I want to get through a little bit more material, I won't dwell on this because where's Ol gone? Ol did a great work talking about the giant squid earlier. What I will tell you, this is creatures that have moved out of the myth and legend zone into the cryptozoological zone, and some that have gone all the way straight back up the curve into the zoological zone. But what I will point out is this particular giant squid on the left. I had a chat to this marine biologist from New Zealand, whose name escapes me at the moment, after he discovered this one, I think about 3 years ago, and asked him the obvious question, how many calamari rings can you make out of this? He actually had tried some, and he said I think he said it was, oh I know, it was really acidic. Yeah. Have you tried it? Oh? No? Yep. Okay. Anyway, he said yeah, it was inedible. But we've had enough on the giant squid debate tonight. In Australia, we won't dwell on the giant squid, but there are many creatures in Australia that we once thought were extinct that have come back. Now many of them are small, such as the leadbeater's possum, which was rediscovered in 1961. Look at that. The mountain pygmy possum, which was thought to be extinct for over 17,000 years and then was rediscovered just in 1966, I think it was, yep. And another one, no? You saw it quickly? The long-nosed potteroo, which was extinct thought to be 17,000 years and rediscovered in 1980. There's just some examples. They're quite small, I know. The Yowie is a large creature. It hasn't been proven to exist yet by science, but yeah, there's a lot of these smaller creatures in Australia that have been rediscovered. So there's a bit of a summary about acme and unusual phenomena ranging from the paranormal to Fortean studies to cryptozoology. But I want to talk to you briefly about a few examples in Australia which combine all three aspects of unusual phenomena, or one or two of them. One is Lake George. It's a strange lake just near where I live in Australia called Canberra. It's the largest freshwater lake in Australia when full. But for some reason it increases with water and decreases with water over time. And since records were kept by Europeans around 150 years ago, the lake is completely filled or dried out on 13 separate occasions. This photograph was taken recently, and this photograph was taken the same similar spot in 1992. You can see the water increases and falls. Now, there's a bit of people aren't too sure why the water in Lake George increases and rises and falls over a short period of time. We know over a long period of time when it rains a lot there's lots of water, when there's a drought there's not much, but sometimes the photographs you've seen there, maybe to not that extent, but the water levels can change or appear to change almost overnight. It's a bit of a mystery as to what was thought, it was a big mystery as to why that happened. And in fact, Australia's capital, Canberra, was actually going to be built on Lake George, and that's what it was going to look like. Doesn't look anything like that for any of you that have been to Canberra, unfortunately. And it was going to have water running through the streets like in Venice, and it was going to be built on Lake George, that lake that you saw. But when the people who decide where the national capital in Australia was going to be built went out and had a look, the peak at Lake George was dry, so they moved it elsewhere. And for those of you that have been to Canberra, they actually ended up building a lake because they missed not having the one at Lake George. But what happens to all the water in Lake George? People used to say a bunyip surfaces in Lake George. Bunyip surfaces and unusual things happening in Lake George. Now, in the same articles or references that refer to a bunyip in Lake George, it says that Lake George is surrounded by gigantic, towering mountains. And the mountains around Lake George are about 50 metres high. So I think the exaggeration there may come into play. There's also links, many myths, I guess you call them, that the water level in Lake George goes up and down according to lakes elsewhere in the world, including ones in Siberia and New Zealand. People have looked at studies that suggest that as a lake in New Zealand goes up, Lake George goes down, and that they're linked in some way. with water flowing through the earth, but again, yeah, that's a pretty far-fetched theory. The scientific world was bamboozled as to how water in Lake George would go up and down over the period of a night. So you'd drive along the side of the lake and you'd see water from here, from basically the front row of people here, and then you come back in the afternoon and the water would be gone. Where did it go? That's right. Lake George, we got out there for a few days to measure what was happening, and basically the water was going from one side of the lake to the other. It was literally being blown like a pendulum. By day, the easterly winds blew all the water to the west, and then by night the westerlies came in and blew all the water back to the east, and literally the water was going from side to side. And this caught out one of the early England explorers from here who went to Lake George in 1823, Joseph Wild, and he put his tent apparently near the edge of the lake and woke up in the night and thought he'd wet his pants. Has anyone here heard of the Min Min light, another strange phenomenon in Australia? Yeah? It's my favourite one. It's a strange light which, I guess it's like this, like the laser pointer. If you look at the laser pointer there, we have it bouncing around the roof all over the shop. It's spotted in outback Queensland, usually red but can sometimes be in different colours. It's been spotted by Aboriginal people reportedly for tens of thousands of years, and quite often by European settlers in recent times. And no one knows exactly what causes all these Min Min lights to appear. Now they're mainly spotted in the outback Queensland area around a town called Boulia, which is a dry outback flat expanse of basically desert. There you go, as you come into, that's what Boulia looks like. That's the main street, there's not much in the town. But it is the Min Min light capital of Australia. Look what it does to you. Mrs. Lincoln's this lady's name. She's one of the few people that claims to have seen the Min Min light 10 times. She basically described it as like a glowing watermelon in the sky that bounced around, but as you chase it and get closer to it, it seems to vanish, and then it comes over there, bounces all around the sky. No one has ever been able to catch up with the source of the Min Min light. What's causing it? This farmer here reckons it was that big. He's got a good hat too, that's why I put him on there. So what is there? What's causing these Min lights? One theory is that they're unidentified flying objects, which of course they are by definition, but that they're associated with some sort of alien activity. Another theory is that they're fireflies, but there are these reports of lights the size of watermelons and coming close and then disappearing, and they don't really fit to fireflies. Another theory that was postulated that they were birds feeding, because a bird called the rare letter-winged kite, its habitat is the same area where these Min Min lights are reported, and this bird actually does feed by sending out an orb of bioluminescence to attract insects and then gobble them up. But still, this bioluminescence isn't red, and it's not seen in the same size that people claim to see the Min Min light. So there was a theory put forward by meteorologists that we went out and investigated that basically was suggesting that this was the Min Min lights, or many of the Min Min lights, was actually a meteorological phenomena, which in the outback of Australia, by night, did I miss a slide there? Sorry. By day, you've got hot air just above the ground, 40, 50 degrees Celsius, and cold air as you go higher up. But by night, just after dusk, you get a layer of temperature inversion where you get cold air just above the earth, and just a layer of hot air that can be just several metres above the surface of the earth and only extending for a few metres. And it was thought that perhaps light was being bent or refracted as it hit this layer of hot air, because light can be bent by layers of hot air and other materials. For example, chuck the pencil in a glass. The pencil's straight, but as you look at it, you have the light coming out of the glass, and through the glass appears as if it's being bent. And so we used this theory and went out into the outback. We went out there one day and we had headlights on our cars and worked out how far you could actually turn headlights on and off and see them in the distance in a straight line. Then we went out there another night when there was a layer of some temperature inversion happening, and we did the same experiment. And to cut a long story short, we were actually able to bend the light over the curvature of the globe, over the curvature of the Earth, which may suggest that a lot of these Min Min lights are just headlights, or from before there were headlights, campfires, that the light from them has been bouncing around the sky, being refracted by this layer of hot air, or also being refracted by hitting clouds. So there's my little diagram. We've got the Earth here. We've got the person standing here looking as if the light's up here, but the light source is actually over the curvature of the globe. Not to this extent, of course, but it's exaggerated here. It's hitting the layer of hot air and bouncing up there, appearing as if it's there. But again, this can only explain some of the Min-Min lights. A lot of the Min-Min lights in Australia remain unexplained. To me, the Min-Min light is Australia's most alluring and captivating mystery, and it's one that I want to get to the bottom of. Another mystery in Australia, or not necessarily mystery, but another, I guess, danger of the job that I do anyway is being cursed. And you might think, well, cryptozoologist doesn't get cursed, but as you saw, I like to investigate other aspects of unusual phenomena, including the paranormal. Now, this is a shipwreck here called the Alkimos off the coast of Western Australia near Perth. This ship was wrecked in 1966, but prior to 1966, it had a terrible lifetime. Everywhere the ship went, something went wrong with it. After it was wrecked, which was a pretty poor event for the ship itself, just a terrible list of bad luck happened. Divers that would go out and try and salvage the wreck would die in accidents on the way home. Ladies that went to swim on the wreck would die, would have miscarriages. People would have heart attacks, they'd have head spins. Just a terrible list of terrible coincidences happening out at the Alkimos shipwreck. And this happened for decades. And so I thought, surely there's no curse, because that's what people said, there's a curse of the Alkimos. Surely it's not a curse, it's just bad luck. So I went out and tested it. You can see me down here on the right hand side. I dived into the water. It was a very calm day. As soon as I went up and swam up and touched the wreck, a freak wave came from nowhere and washed me up against the wreck, putting a cut into my hand. Birds came from nowhere, hitting the wreck and started squawking. And from that moment on, a terrible feeling came over me. Because as I did this, I said, if there's a curse, show yourself. And I thought, no, this is just bad luck. Curses don't exist. But for the next 2 weeks, I was subjected to the worst luck possible. My girlfriend left to go overseas unexpectedly for 3 years. My grandmother died unexpectedly. I was writing at the time, this might answer your question at the back again, for about 10 different magazines around the world. About 7 of them folded in that week they weren't linked to each other. I was headbutted unconscious by a camel. I had all these tests, they couldn't work out what was wrong with me, and I went all the way back home. I live on the other side of Australia, and I was just, every day things were going wrong. And I sat at home and thought, I've got to get back over there. So I got all my frequent flyer points, used them and flew all the way back over to the shipwreck, went out to it, touched it, and said, I don't know what's going on here, but it's beyond my realms of understanding. I just like to report on unusual things in Australia. The paranormal is beyond my realms of understanding, but I apologise, I'm sorry, just let me be. And from that moment on, a calm did come over the sea and a calm came over me. And from then on, I've had good luck ever since, so I've been sure never to mess with curses since then. However, a lot of curses in Australia are all associated with the Aboriginal people, including this one here. This is the curse at Black Mountain, which is a huge pile of rocks, black rocks, in northern Queensland. This is a very unusual geological feature, and the rocks are actually, there's a ghost bat, a giant rat and an unusual python that exists nowhere on planet Earth but in that mountain. It's just basically like a pile of rocks just piled upon each other. And when you go in there, you've actually got to get a rope and have lots of people with you, because you can get lost at any turn. And over the years, you only do go in there, well, I only went in there with the help of Doris McLean, the lady on the right, who's the local from the Cryptozoological tribe, who are sort of custodians of Black Mountain. And her tribal people warn people, particularly white people, not to go into Black Mountain area unless they have a local Aboriginal with them. And some white people that did go in there in the early 1900s went missing. In fact, a a whole, I think there was about 30 cows, and the farmer looking after them went missing. A whole lot of gold and bushrangers that were associated with the gold apparently hid in the Black Mountain. They were never seen again. A policeman went into Black Mountain, he went missing. People now basically stand clear of the place. The Aboriginal people say, yeah, don't go near it, and now a lot of people don't, unless they have an Aboriginal person with them. But you might be more familiar with this one. The Curse of Uluru, or Ayers Rock, probably one of Australia's biggest tourist attractions. A lot of people like to come over and take a bit of the rock home with them. Has anyone here done that? No? Has anyone here visited Uluru or Ayers Rock? No one? Okay. Well, if you ever do go to Uluru, don't chip a piece of rock off Uluru, which a lot of people do. They also take home a little stone, such as this one on the right, because they have a small room at the Uluru Ranger Station full of rocks that have been returned by people at great expense in the post from around the world. You know how heavy some rocks are. Because people that have taken rocks have just been subjected to terrible bad luck, and it's thought that, well, the Aboriginal people say that you should not be taking any of the rock away. And I'd just like to, if I can find it in my book here, read to you what the Aboriginal custodians say about Uluru. As they hear a little about this place and a little about that place, and they put it all together in one bucket and shake it all up. Everything gets broken and mixed up, and when they pour it out in their own country to try and remember, they don't know what pieces go together. They should take it home in their hearts, then they'd remember. The Aboriginal people are very, it's a very sacred place for them, and they actually don't even like people climbing it. You might have seen people climbing Uluru. The local Aboriginal people don't like people climbing, and particularly don't like people taking home bits of rock. Now, one of the favourite things about being a cryptozoologist or mystery investigator more broadly in Australia is going to unusual places. One of the unusual places in Australia is Christmas Island. Have anyone here seen a documentary of masses of red crabs going across an island? Yeah. Yep, so David Attenborough, I think, called it one of the greatest mass migrations, animal migrations on the planet. And just a couple of years ago I went over to look for this giant crab here, which isn't one of the little red crabs, but a giant robber crab or coconut crab. They don't exist in many places in the world anymore in great numbers because they've been eaten out, but on Christmas Island they're preserved. And this was a giant coconut crab. No one had seen a coconut crab of this size before on the island, and I was over there looking for it, and my point here is I didn't actually find it, but it happened to coincide with all these amazing red crab migration, and just being there and experiencing the mass migration was unbelievable. Just lying on the ground, letting the crabs crawl over the top of you, literally millions of them as they race down to the sea to coincide with a high tide and a full moon to mate, and then go back up into their burrows for the next 360 odd days. Just an incredible experience. So I guess by being a cryptozoologist and by being an investigator into unusual things in Australia, it's enabled me to appreciate a lot of the wildlife that we know does exist to science. One, however, that is a bit unusual is the drop bear. This is usually one story told, and this is probably, I have to say, one in the myth and legend bag of the graph in Australia. But it's one that a lot of Australians like to tell visiting American soldiers when they come to Australia, that there's this drop bear like a giant koala that sits up in trees and just drops silently out of the tree on unsuspecting prey below and just rips them to shreds. And, you know, Americans, apologies to any Americans in here, but Americans can be fairly gullible about some things, particularly when it comes to wildlife in Australia, because we do have so many, as Richard pointed out, unusual wildlife in Australia. And one way to repel drop bears is to smear your face in Vegemite, because they don't like Vegemite. So yeah, Australia has its full range of cryptozoological creatures, from the drop bear in the myth and legend zone, the Yowie and bunyip and big cat in the cryptozoological zone, and of course the Tasmanian tiger, which, like Richard, I also believe is probably still in the zoological zone. Now I know my time's almost up, but before I go, I know there's a lot of readers of Fortean Times here, and if you ever read the little back bit or the mailbag, there's always examples in there of faces and forms in nature, simulacra, and I just want to give a couple of examples in Australia just to finish off my little talk tonight. Can you see the crocodile there?
Yeah.
No one would have looked or found that crocodile resemblance in that rock unless this is in the northern part of New South Wales where crocodiles don't exist, so no one would have gone, oh, that probably looks like a crocodile. Until in the 1970s, someone actually saw a real croc in the area, and there was a real croc hunt on in the area. It was a cryptid in the area because they don't exist. It's an out-of-place cryptozoological creature. And because people were looking for a real crocodile, they stumbled across this one here. That's a frog. You see the frog? Yeah, I like that one. In the Blue Mountains, the World Heritage Area of Australia, I like this one because the Blue Mountains is one of 3 hotspots in Australia for Yowie reports. The other is the Snowy Mountains near where I had mine, and the other area is the Gold Coast hinterland in Queensland. But you can see the monkey almost Yowie profile in the rock face here. Those not familiar with a map of Australia, it's a natural carving created by the ocean. He's getting towards the end of the night, and hopefully the next one won't offend anyone, but stumbled upon this one just last week while walking through a place in New South Wales, so I'll only put it up briefly. Oops, it's gone. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me along. I'd like to, I don't want to thank the top one there. It says, thanks to Vroom Vroom Vroom, a rental car company. That's another reason I came here late. They promised me a rental car in Oxford, and unfortunately it wasn't there when I went to pick it up this morning, so we had to try and find another one, and yeah, it's one of the reasons I was late. But I would like to thank John, Richard and the team here for inviting me along, and for all of you staying so late and listening to me. And also Dave, where's Dave? Thank you. I put all these slides through, luckily over the internet in the last week or so I didn't have to bring them all out with me. Thank you very much. And so, any questions? I think, have I run out of time, John?
Nah, you've got a couple of minutes. The bar's open another 35 minutes.
Okay. So, any questions before I vanish? Yes?
What do you think of the...
Hang on a second, because we're going to record this. Can I have a volunteer? Max?
Yeah, I was going to say it was
Max, we haven't got the small children anymore, and you're short of I am, so you'll be the runner.
What do you think, Tim, of the Queensland tiger? What is it, and is it still around? And what do you think the owls are, hominids or apes?
Interesting question. First part, the Queensland marsupial tiger, is that the one you're referring to? Do I still think it's out there? I don't think the Queensland marsupial tiger is out. Oh, I'll rephrase it. I'm not sure if the Queensland marsupial tiger is still out there. There haven't been many reports of the Queensland marsupial tiger that I'm familiar of in recent years. Some people claim that there could be all sorts of creatures, including the thylacoleo, which was around, many tens of thousands of years ago. But I'm not a supporter of that theory. Others believe that it could be, a tree climbing kangaroo, and it's just a case of mistaken identity. Others believe it could be a new creature to science. To tell you the truth, I am sitting on the fence on the Queensland marsupial tiger just because the number of sightings have dropped right off in recent years. I haven't seen any conclusive evidence or even any tangible evidence to suggest that it's out there. That's not to suggest that it's not. And I do spend a lot of time in Queensland and get a lot of reports from Queensland. But for example, for every thylacine report, for every Queensland marsupial tiger report, there might be 50 or so Tasmanian tiger reports. There's very few reports of it still. As to the Yowie, when I first had my encounter with the Yowie, which I was telling you about, I used to think that they had to be flesh and blood creatures, and that was it an ape, was it a hominid, where did it come from? Was it Homo erectus? Was it Homo sapien? Was it related to the orang pendek up in Malaysia? I looked into all these things, was a bit confused about it all, and in recent years, after talking to so many other eyewitnesses of the Yowie, and the distinct lack of any physical evidence to suggest that the Yowie is out there, I actually don't think it's either, Richard, and I actually think that it's quite possibly a paranormal being. I've moved completely from the flesh and blood right into the paranormal camp, which I know there's a few people here that investigate Bigfoot in the United States and other places around the world, and in America it's a very hot topic, whether you're from the flesh and blood or you're from the paranormal camp, and it has resulted into punch-ups in car parks, and I won't be getting into that tonight. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Heather, my dear.
How do you work your camera on your bull bar?
How do I work my camera on my bull bar?
Yes, how do you take the picture?
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't a picture camera, it was a video camera that you could then take stills from. So it's a rolling video camera that's on the bull bar, rolling the whole time. Yeah. It wasn't my camera, because that was back in the days when I didn't, I wasn't getting $10,000 rewards here and there. It was one of the locals from Smithton actually helped me put up the video camera on the bull bar. But I have done it since. Yeah, you literally just strap it on, and yeah, away it goes. But yeah, I'm not sure how. Yeah, constantly rolling. Yeah.
Who's the girl by the parking meter?
Sorry, I missed that one.
Who's the girl by the parking?
Oh, I didn't realise she was up there.
This is a question from our noted academic and all-round high moral arbiter of thingies. Your high moral arbiter of thingies, Ronan.
I put that up there just because it was late in the night, just to keep some of you awake. But also, soon after I became Tim the Yowie Man, there were a lot of Yowie reports in the Queensland region, and for those of you that have been to Queensland, in particular the Gold Coast, it's a tourist type area. They have what's up there called meter maids, and they actually, to save tourists getting fined for not putting enough money in their parking meters at the beach, they go around scantily clad, such as this young lady, and actually save you by putting 20 cents back then or $1 in the meter, and you've been saved by a Gold Coast meter maid. So people love the meter maids for not only what they wear, but how they save people. And the way they operated to get their 20 cents and $1 to save people was they were sponsored. And to get my name out in southeast Queensland, I actually sponsored one, which is quite unusual for a cryptozoologist, I know. That's what I did. And in fact, last time I met John and Richard, somewhere up in the middle of nowhere, where was that?
Newcastle.
Someone was wearing one of those stickers up there, weren't they?
They were, yeah.
I was wondering how that girl in the leather trousers in Newcastle actually got that sticker on that particular part of anatomy.
Ask Richard.
No, I seem to remember that was the night Richard met War last.
Yes.
No, I think
Yeah.
I seem to remember it was you, Mr. Yowie.
No, I can't recall that.
You can neither confirm nor deny.
Anyway, it was a bit too. It was a bit too cold in. Did you say Newcastle or Newcastle? It was a bit too cold there to wear a bikini, so she just decided to wear it on her clothing.
Well, just as a tribute to your scientific prowess.
Yes.
What a wonderful man you are, Tim. Ladies and gentlemen, as he's just brought up, he's just actually spoiled my story. Tim and me and Richard were, you guys remember Mike Halliwell, who was here last year and the year before. He used to run a paranormal club in Newcastle, and they used to meet every Halloween in this rather nice cellar of an old haunted pub. And Mike phoned me up and said, guess who? We've got Tim the Yowie Man here. And I said, who's Tim the Yowie Man? I've never heard of him. Then he came here. We spent an evening telling stupid jokes, drinking a little bit too much, behaving mildly badly. We've kept in touch ever since. And I'm really, really chuffed that for our 10th weird weekend we managed to have our old friend Tim the Yowie Man. Thank you very much, Timothy.
Thank you, John.